So before I begin the sermon, a little disclaimer. This sermon will gradually evolve into a critique of some forms of evangelical Christianity, and especially white Christian nationalism. I want to be clear that it is not a critique of Christianity as a whole. And I have deep, deep respect for the Christian tradition and have many, many friends who consider themselves liberal Christians, not conservative Christians. And knowing that we do have guests with us today celebrating Sam's birthday, and not knowing necessarily the affiliations of some of these folks, just a warning, if you skew conservative politically, I am probably going to make you a little uncomfortable, maybe a lot uncomfortable, and just be forewarned, I do it with love. It matters what we believe. It matters what we believe because beliefs shape the reality we try to create in the world. Some beliefs sew together the ripped but always healing fabric of our lives. Some beliefs sow the seeds of separation and fear. I was confronted with one of those beliefs of division and separation and fear on my first day in Fresno. It was August 2015. I had just driven cross-country from Boston, eagerly anticipating the start of my ministry here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Fresno. It was late afternoon. I had passed the sign announcing Fresno city limits, turned off the 99, and drove up Herndon Avenue past Marks, Palm, Blackstone, towards what I thought was going to be my new neighborhood near Herndon and Cedar. I pulled into the driveway of the house I had rented long distance and sight unseen. As I opened my car door, I was struck by the sense that something was not right. I could hear a sound that I shouldn't be hearing. I opened the gate to the backyard and cautiously walked in, down the sidewalk, and then turned the corner. There was a torrent of water gushing out the back wall of the house. It turns out that the bathroom pipes had burst sometime during my journey cross country, and the entire house was flooded, sopping wet. There was a quick call and conversation with the landlord, and then I was in my car heading back down Herndon Ave to Blackstone to find a cheap room for the night. Not knowing then, you probably shouldn't look for cheap rooms at a hotel on Blackstone. Yep. I pulled into a rather sketchy motel. I parked and I walked into the lobby. As I checked in, I told the young clerk behind the front desk my tale of the busted bathroom pipe and my tale of watery woe. The desk clerk looked at me with uneasy eyes, then said, "Satan is at work in the world. He gets to you when you least expect it. First, he ruins your house, and then he steals your soul." Woo! I thought, welcome to Fresno. According to a recent Gallup poll, 64% of Americans believe in Satan. 64% of Americans believe the devil is real. Interesting enough, Americans are almost 3 times as likely to believe in the devil as in evolution. Only 22% of Americans believe that Darwinian evolution is a real and active force in the universe, while 64% believe that Satan is a real and active force in the world. Elaine Pagels, in her fascinating book, The Origin of Satan, makes it clear that Satan is a human invention, a made-up, mythical figure, but one with great psychological significance. Elaine Pagels writes, "I invite you to consider Satan as a reflection of how we perceive ourselves and those we call other." Anthropologist Robert Redfield believes that most people have a worldview limited to 2 different ways of dividing up things. This worldview comes in 2 pairs, human and non-human, we and they. Further, Redfield says, we combine these 2 pairs so that we equals human and they equals non-human. Now, making this distinction between us as okay and human and them as not okay and not human is perhaps a basic human inclination. The earliest known writings of the human race, those coming out of Sumeria and other ancient cities in the Middle East, already make that division, claiming dignity and worth for some kinds of people and cutting off other certain kinds of people. We see it later in the Jewish tradition. When the Jewish God calls Moses out of the desert to lead the chosen people, the Israelites, God is, if you think about it, calling a lot of other people the not-so-chosen people. Now, I could live with not being one of the chosen people, but when that outsider status also marks me as one in league with the devil, I get a little nervous. That separation and satanic designation is what happens early in the development of the Christian tradition. And that is what is happening today in this country as a virulent new form of white Christian nationalism gains popularity and power. Now, the idea of Satan emerged in the Jewish world. It was very different from the horned, red-caped doer of dastardly deeds that we picture today. First, in that early Jewish tradition, Satan wasn't even the name of a particular being. Rather, the Satan was a role. And that should be slide 88. I think there we go. The Satan was a Jewish legal term that means one who opposes or obstructs. The Satan was an obedient member of God's heavenly court. His role was to be a kind of authenticity checker, creating little tests to make sure that the person holds to their faith and their good behavior. This early form of Satan was kind of like, almost like an aggressive Santa Claus, a special being of superior intelligence who makes a list and checks it twice and finds out who's been naughty and who's been nice. Evil isn't one of Satan's qualities, but checking to see if evil is one of your qualities is the job of Satan. But then that role of the Satan began to slowly change in the development of the Jewish religion. As Israel is conquered again and again by outside forces, it must naturally struggle to keep its racial and religious identity from being diluted by all the other cultures and religions that are around them. It does so by drawing a tighter and tighter circle around itself, deepening the separation between us and them. Now, this isn't a judgment, it's simply an historical observation. As ancient Israel secures its boundaries, the Satan slowly evolves into Satan, an angel figure who challenges the power of the Jewish God. For questioning the boundaries of God's law, Satan is cast out of the heavenly court, cast out of the inner circle. The message is clear. If you challenge the norm, if you break with professed tradition, if you question authority, you will be cast out. And so, Satan is tossed down to earth, where he begins his rule, inflicting pain on hapless humans. But this evolution of Satan on earth now is very different from the Satan in today's evangelical Christianity. This version of Satan does not cause bathroom pipes to burst. Nor is this Satan engaged in a great cosmic battle against the forces of good with the soul of humanity as the victor's prize. Rather, most of the time, this version of Satan has a more domestic agenda. Yes, he's a tempter towards wrongdoing, but most of all, Satan is believed to be the source of human illness, disease, and physical deformity. This Satan functions more like a virus, the COVID-19 of his generation. This Satan is also believed to be the source of various forms of mental illness, which at that time was understood as a person being possessed by demons. Satan as a troublesome physical and emotional health meddler was the belief that Jesus of Nazareth inherits as he begins his ministry in ancient Palestine around the year 30 CE. If we look at the earliest existing stories and myths about Jesus that are found in the Gospel of Mark and written about 40 years after Jesus' death, we see a very human Jesus, no divine Jesus Christ superstar. We see this human being who at the age of 30 feels called to become a traveling spiritual teacher and healer. For 3 years, he travels to towns and villages teaching that love and justice must embrace all people, no matter how marginalized they may be. Jesus, these early stories and myths tell us, also performs remarkable physical healings for those suffering from illness, disease, or disability. For instance, he gives sight to someone who could not see. Jesus is the vaccine to Satan's virus. But something happens. Something happens in this healthcare struggle between Jesus and Satan. Some early Christians distort this struggle between Jesus and Satan and turn it into a struggle between Jesus and anyone who doesn't follow him. The early Christians literally create a battle between Jesus and the Jews, who they gradually equate as being in league with Satan. As we've already said, the early story of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus challenges the power of Satan that are impacting the health and the well-being of his fellow Jews. Jesus' mission is making life better for them. 20 years later, another version of the Jesus myth is written, the Gospel of Matthew. It names Jews as connected to Satan's power, calling them sons of hell. It gets worse. Another version of the Jesus story is written some years later, and this Gospel of John now has Satan embodied in the Jews themselves. You are the father, you are of your father, the devil, and you want to accomplish your father's desires, says Jesus in that version. In the early story of Jesus, the Romans crucify him as an insurrectionist. In the later versions, the Romans are seen handing Jesus over to the Jews. It's now the Jews that crucify Jesus, which was not at all what happened. This mirrors, though, the experience of Jesus' followers in the years after his death. They begin as devout Jews and want to remain Jewish, but they are slowly expelled by the Jewish community for their radical Jesus beliefs. So these castaways define themselves not as Jews, but as something entirely different. And in claiming this new identity, they begin to demonize the people they see as rejecting their version of the truth. It's not enough that they have differences, they turn them into satanic enemies. This is just the beginning of a long and bloody history of conservative Christianity naming the other, those seen as other, different, as satanic. In Jesus' time, Satan was the cause of blindness and leprosy. For today's white Christian nationalism, Satan has become the cause of all kinds of societal evil that threatens the very existence of a desired, racially whitewashed Christian nation. For many evangelical Christians today, who have either drunk the dangerous Kool-Aid of white Christian nationalism or use it to their political and financial gain, Satan is the source of a constitution that should protect the rights of all people. Satan is the source of the civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter protests, land acknowledgments, and critical race theory. Satan is the source of Florida's AP courses on Black history and the source of wokeism. Satan is the source of feminism and the struggle for gender equality. Satan is the source of Roe v. Wade and easy access to health care. Satan is the source of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. Thank you, Satan. Satan is the source of marriage equality, the source of gender-neutral bathrooms and hormone treatments for trans teens. Satan is the source of gender fluidity. Satan is the source of pronouns on our name tags and on Zoom IDs. Satan is the cause of the removal of Confederate statues from places of honor and the cause of liberal or progressive political agenda that believes a government should do more than flex its muscle for corporations and the rich. Satan is the cause of the separation between church and state. Satan is the cause of prayer being forbidden in public schools and evolution being taught in textbooks. We got to get that out of there, they say. Satan is the source of our respect for Hinduism and Islam, Buddhism, and other faiths. Satan is the source of Unitarian Universalism. Satan is the source of NPR. For many evangelical Christians and white Christian nationalists, it's not enough to have differences of opinion with people. They turn those who do not share their worldview into satanic enemies, echoing the words from the Gospel of John saying, "You are of the devil, and you want to accomplish the devil's desires." What they're saying is we want to accomplish the devil's desires. 42% of Americans describe themselves as evangelical or born-again Christians. For many of them, not all, but many of them, that designation comes with a set of beliefs about the nature of the world and our mission in it. One that is saturated in superstition and propelled by the very real need to conquer a cosmic satanic force. Seeing this belief guiding international actions by two of our recent former presidents, I tremble. Seeing this belief guiding the actions of some members of our current House of Representatives and Senate, I tremble. Seeing this belief fueling QAnon and many MAGA supporters, I tremble. Seeing this belief bubbling up with a new ferocity in governors' mansions and state houses and in school boards across the country, I tremble. Seeing this belief embraced by some who will seek their party's 2024 nomination in the presidential race, I tremble. Dear ones, it matters what we believe. It matters what we believe because beliefs shape the reality we will try to create in the world. Our Unitarian Universalist faith, which works hard to welcome questions and doubts and uncertainties, our Unitarian Universalist faith, which acknowledges that belief is deeply personal and should transform over time, our Unitarian Universalist faith, which attempts to build bridges between people. Our Unitarian Universalist faith, which acknowledges that the mysteries of life cannot be reduced and contained in a single creed. Our Unitarian Universalist faith, which celebrates the interdependent web of life of which we are a part. Our Unitarian Universalist faith cannot be silent and inactive in the face of a conservative agenda that is damaging our country right before our eyes. Sophia Foz, a great Unitarian Universalist thinker and religious educator, once wrote, "Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies. Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of the unknown. Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness. Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, inflexible in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life." It matters what we believe, because beliefs shape the reality we will try to create in the world. Blessed be. Amen.